précieux. Avant de donner la parole à Colleen et à Max, j'aimerais tout d'abord vous les présenter. Tout d'abord, Colleen. Bonjour, Colleen.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Alors, elle est enseignante et animatrice au sein du programme de communication, médias et arts plastiques du Collège Vanier depuis 2013. Sa passion pour la pédagogie alternative et expérientielle puise ses racines dans ses expériences personnelles d'apprenante et dans ses précédents travaux dans le secteur des arts médiatiques, notamment à l'Office national du film du Canada, où elle a travaillé sur des projets visant à amplifier la diversité des voix et des perspectives sur des enjeux nationaux et internationaux. Sa certification en art thérapeutique a approfondi son intérêt pour les bienfaits cognitifs de l'expression créative et son lien puissant avec l'apprentissage et le bien-être. Quant à Max Salonine, il est conseiller pédagogique au Collège Vanier. Est-ce que ça va, Max? Oui?
Oui, bonjour.
Parfait.
Bonjour.
Ah, OK. Est titulaire d'une maîtrise en éducation, psychologie de l'éducation de l'Université McGill. Il possède une vaste expérience en enseignement collégial, car il enseignait entre autres divers cours en sciences humaines et sociales, notamment à des élèves en difficulté d'apprentissage. Au sein de l'équipe du soutien et innovation pédagogique de Vanier, Max soutient des initiatives d'animation pédagogique, notamment le groupe ECT, Communauté d'enseignants engagés, et les journées pédagogiques locales et intercollégiales. Il assiste également le corps professoral dans le soutien et le développement des programmes d'études. Alors, bon webinaire, mesdames, messieurs. Je donne la parole à notre conférencière et à notre conférencier. Amusez-vous bien.
Merci, Nicole. Merci tout le monde d'être ici. It's so lovely to see you. I'm going to forget to speak English, I think. If any of you have would like to speak or ask questions in French, please don't be shy. I'm more than happy to respond in both languages. So yes, a big thank you to OccupyC and everyone. And I am going to share my screen now so that we can get started. And voila. So, whoops, we're going to go right over here and open this one up, and off we go. So, therapeutic arts. So I like to present, I like to talk about a little bit of how blackout poetry came to be. So I think many of you are aware that this activity is all about blackout poetry. Some of you might know what that is, some of you might not. But I like to frame it as such that a couple of years ago, I became certified as a therapeutic arts practitioner. And the interest in doing that had a lot to do with my own interest as an artist. I was feeling like I needed to learn again how to not be afraid of the canvas. My medium is more film and video and photography, but again, metaphorically, the canvas. And I also had a funny feeling that in learning about therapeutic arts, I would find a bridge with pedagogy. And it was very much the case. And so what is important to know about therapeutic arts is that it's not about learning how to draw something perfectly. It's not about the precision of form. It's really about the process. So drawing something might imply, putting down your emotions more than putting down a specific object or learning how to do something very specifically, again, formally. So that process was very valuable, and doing the certification at one point invited us as students to do a project called Blackout Poetry. And it was quite a revelation, because the request was to use a book that meant a lot to us, whatever that was. Think back in your story, in your life, and think about a book that really was maybe one of the first books that was really valuable to you, and open up the page. So we're asked to open up the page, any random page, start wherever you want, and find words that resonate for you, and do that for the purpose of finding a poem. or a statement of any kind. And following that, we were asked to black things out. Anything that was not part of the poem, we would black it out and or add art to it. And doing that was absolutely it really changed a lot for me. It was very powerful. I noticed the metacognition that was a part of the process. I was noticing that I was looking for something. I was a detective in looking for something that I wanted to say. I was scanning the page. I was rescanning. I was thinking. There were so many stages to doing just that one thing that I thought this has a lot of power to it. So this is the beginning, therapeutic arts for pedagogy. It's about process, not product. So what we're going to do today is, of course, not just, I'm introducing therapeutic arts. We're going to talk about blackout poetry. You will have an opportunity to try it yourself. And then, of course, we'll have time for a discussion and its various forms of application. And I have a number of slides that you'll see that demonstrate how it's been done in classes. I give workshops to my colleagues at Vanier College and go into the classroom. I bring art supplies and we have the experience with students. So I have a number of examples of the reactions that students have had. So here we are in this moment where I think a lot of you can appreciate that we have a crisis with reading. And the question is, how do we encourage an interest while softening the frustrations and struggles with comprehension? No matter the language, no matter the discipline, many of our disciplines include reading, and there is something that we need to address there with the way that reading has become a struggle, it seems, for many of our students. So blackout poetry. We saw at the beginning, an example, art is 99% robbery, and here's another example of that. So blackout poetry, or in French, poésie occultante, is a form of found poetry. This has gone back hundreds of years. It's not a new art form. It's part of a cluster of, again, found poetry, where words are redacted from any text to create poetry. And again, it can be a statement, it can be, a sentiment of some kind, but often, we'll suggest that it relates to poetry of some sort. So what is blackout poetry is the example in front of you. And the theory goes like this, and this is the theory that I bring to you as a pedagogical tool. Why do I see it as a pedagogical tool, and what do I think that it can really provide? Creating blackout poetry can assist students from any discipline to develop a personal and meaningful relationship with their reading material, enhance their comprehension and retention, deepen their concentration skills, and offer a moment of well-being. And je veux souligner well-being. I think it's important to remember that, how can we introduce slow pedagogy to our careers a little bit, to our classrooms? Again, another thing that we need to think about, and whoops, sorry about that. Adding art to a classroom is going to do just that. And I often encourage teachers when I'm doing the workshop or when I'm doing it as I am with you now or in person, for the teachers to also be doing the art form at the same time, because it is such a valuable way to just slow down the pace and enjoy being creative and taking care of ourselves, in the moment as well. This is an example of, these are examples of found poetry. So yes, I'm bringing to you the example of blackout poetry, but we have other forms of found poetry that could just as much, stimulate ideas for educators, such as erasure poetry. It looks very much the same, but rather than blacking things out, you are erasing the words around the poem that you've created. The one in the middle, book spine poetry, can be a lot of fun. Maybe you've noticed your students don't go to the library as often as they used to. And if you want to reinvigorate that space a little bit, there are lots of ideas that you can come up with that include this kind of detective work and finding poetry all around you. And this is a lot of fun, book spine poetry. So the middle one reads, "Meet Addie, the toothpaste millionaire. Terrific teeth. Addie learns a lesson. Never smile at a monkey." So, you can, you can make it very playful. My PowerPoint's going a little wild. You can make it very playful. And, what you do with the books afterwards could be, right for all kinds of ideas. The last one being cutout poetry. So there you have the idea of pre-cutting or asking the students to cut up texts and, putting them in such a way that they are creating new meaning and new stories. So these are examples of blackout poetry that, again, are not just about blacking out, but the next couple of slides are about showing you that you can invite your students not to black out simply what's around the poem, but obscure. So the one in the middle, "Un cœur de pierre dans l'espoir qui se mit à prier, voix profonde lui répondit." So beautiful pieces can come out of a lot of things, and to ask your students to also not just find the poem, but to take the time to enjoy creating some, art around their poem is part of that process, and part of the enjoyment that they can have to bring down the pace. The one on your left here, called neurographic art, is one that I notice students gravitate to quite a bit. Neurographic art is actually a way in which we, and I'm going to show you actually a slide right now, what you do is that on any given page, and I invite you to try it even after this webinar or during this webinar, it's a very comforting thing to do when you're looking for a doodle. You draw lines, intersecting lines on a page, and where the intersections occur in those corners, you then soften the corners by creating, a little U. And so it looks, of course, at the end like what you've got on the right-hand side of your screen, and hence it is called neurographic because it has the neuron appeal, the neuron look, and it really truly does, it can really have the effect of calming, just a calming effect. So going back here again, when students, gravitate toward, decide that they're going to obscure the page after their poem is created, they often gravitate towards this as art and enjoy the coloring process, enjoy the softening of the edges, and so forth. And the one on the right, keeping a journal, some of you might ask your students to keep journals, and also just a fun thing to do and a place in which they can keep such activities as the blackout poetry that you might wish to do in class. So I'd like to show you now an example. This example, I'll ask Nicole in a moment to run the video. But just as a little preamble, Austin Kleon is an artist, a writer, and he has a TED Talk that's out there. And once upon a time, he thought he had invented blackout poetry, only to discover that it's hundreds of years old. It's nothing new, found poetry forms. But he has since created, I think he's published at least a couple of books, and they are books of poetry that have been created as blackout poetry. And so what you're going to see in this video is him, a very fast forward version of him producing a blackout poem very quickly in a newspaper. And there's no speaking. It's less than 2 minutes long, and it will give you an idea of how it gets done. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I will invite Nicole to now run the video. C'est beau. Merci, Nicole. That's great. Okay. So I hope that was helpful, very, very quick. But ultimately, what I often invite students to do, because it'll happen, for ourselves as much as students, will be, where do I begin? How do I start finding that poem? And you'll notice that students can get a little bit, anybody can get a little bit nervous with starting this. It's really important to remember that for this activity, like with any art activity, we need to bring down the pace. We need to really invite our students to know that this is a moment for them to enjoy themselves and to not see it as stressful. And I think that's part of why I'm such an advocate of bringing the arts into a classroom, is that we need to break down that wall that is so gradually built in our lifetime that tells us that we're not creative. And to assist that with blackout poetry, I'll often again just say, the first word that pops out at you on that page, what is it? And start there, and then start building a poem around that. And generally speaking, we ask students to, or we'll ask someone to build the poem, from top to bottom. Some students have made, I've come across where some students have made the mistake and go, oh, I built my poem with words all over the place. There's no wrong answer to, wrong way of doing it. You can always, produce art in such a way that it leads people's eye towards the words that, are intended to be the poem. That's okay. But that can be a nice entry point. Just find the word that is most attractive to you and then build your poem around it. So it is up to you now to give it a try. And we'll turn it over to Max to assist the process and with Miro. So sorry, before we go there. Yeah, I'll just point out before we do that, just to clarify. So before you try it, the idea again is start by identifying a word, like I pointed out, that stands out for you, and then build your poem around it. Your poem could be made up of 3 or more words. I just give that as a standard. Your poem could be 1 word. Your poem could be 20 words. There's really no right or wrong, and that's really important to remember. For the purpose of this context, of course, I'll just ask that you black out the rest, and you'll see how to do that. Sorry. And then, try to notice in the process, what are you experiencing? How are you engaging with the text? So the text, by the way, will be the following, just to set the stage a little bit. And it's taken from Jean Piaget. So it reads, and of course, I have both of them up here in French and English. And I'm sorry, I think there's a little typo in the French one on écriture, but it reads, affirming the right of all human beings to education is to take on a far greater responsibility than simply to assure to each one reading, writing, and arithmetic capabilities. It is to guarantee fairly to each child the entire development of his mental faculties and the acquisition of knowledge and of ethical values corresponding to the exercise of these faculties until adaptation to actual social life. Moreover, it is to assume the obligation, keeping in mind the aptitudes and constitution that each person possesses, of not destroying or spoiling those possibilities that he may have that would benefit society, first of all, or of allowing the loss of important abilities and the smothering of others. So on that note, we'll turn it over, go through the process again. You'll probably want to read it. And voila, I will stop sharing. And we'll take it from here.
Yeah, so just a couple of technical notes. So we have the same passage that Colleen just read in English and in French. So choose whatever option you're more comfortable with. For those who have not tried Miro as a platform, I can do a quick little demonstration. Share my screen. There we go. So to move around the virtual whiteboard, you use the right click of your mouse, and then you drag right left. If you want to zoom in and out, you use the wheel of your mouse. So in yellow, we have all the French quotes. So here's one instance. And then in your show purple, we have the English version. Okay. So in terms of blacking out the text, you have a couple of options. So here on the left-hand side, you have your tools. You can use the pen, or you can use a highlighter, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And then for each of these tools, you can select the thickness and then the color as well by clicking and selecting the color you want to work with. And off you go. Also, if you want a more private space to work with, you can grab a note and you can move it around with the left click of your mouse. So I can drag it out of the frame here. I want to work on it privately. Zoom in, oops, and start highlighting.
So you have the link in the chat, and you're anonymous. So there's no don't worry about anyone watching. It's just to have the exercise of trying to find a poem within a text. So take a few minutes and try to imagine. If you want to put on some soft music, you can do that too for 5 minutes. I usually always have soft music going on in the background when I'm doing a workshop like this, or in a classroom. So yeah, enjoy yourself for 5 minutes and see what you come up with to move on. But it's wonderful to watch, the mysterious poems coming together, and by all means continue to go about it. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And so what you're doing now is an individual process. There are a million different ways to introduce the blackout poetry to your classes. Many different angles you can take with it. So you're doing it on an individual level, but you can just as well think of it as how doing it within teams. And this is an example, again, one of many, where you ask your students to read through the text individually. So they might each have a text that you bring in, a page, and then the students can take turns finding the poem collectively. So one person circles the first word of interest and then takes turns. It's going to shrink my screen here. Takes turns, looking for, other words, so that they all build the poem collectively. And when they're done building that poem, they can, discuss with each other how the poem relates to the original text. They can also discuss what kind of art design that they imagine the final poem to have to obscure the rest of the words instead of blacking all the other words out. So many, many different options and angles to take with doing blackout poetry in a classroom on a singular level or as a collective. So these are some examples, and I wanted to just show you some examples of where, of students in action doing the work, and comments that have come up. I learned that words mean more than we think. A lot of different, and I won't read them all, but I'll give you an opportunity to just have a look and get a feel for what, a lot of students have said. There's nothing like having a classroom full of art supplies to motivate. I'll go to the next one. A humanities teacher made reference to this. I'm sorry, I'm trying to minimize my view. Here we go. I use blackout poetry to help my students read texts and to get them to focus on what they understood immediately. I did this so that they would begin with from a position of confidence, connection, and self-direction. This seemed to get them to want to read further and work on parts of the readings or material that were more challenging. So a lot of really wonderful comments that teachers have made, in the last year when they've introduced this to their students. Another one here. One of the first ones that I did was in a French class, a remedial French class, and c'était vraiment un soulagement pour les élèves. It was, and so the teacher made comments. J'ai surtout été impressionnée par les dessins et les détails qu'ils ont ajoutés à leur blackout poem. So once all the students had done their blackout poem, we had an exhibit on the wall. And what's really fun about that, and again, we make it anonymous. The students don't have to, put their name on the front if they don't want to, but you're putting an exhibit on the wall for the students to look at and then observe how many different interpretations that a text can have to each of the students. So it's very, it can be very special that way. And again, adding more and more information to what the objectives are for the course, and obviously the important aspects of the article to begin with. A comment from a student, mon message sur mon poème est de retrouver ta jeunesse en passant des obstacles et de se retrouver, is the first line of this one. J'ai bien aimé cet atelier parce que ça m'a donné une nouvelle façon d'utiliser ma créativité. Our students are craving creativity. They're craving using their imagination. And you will be amazed at once you introduce something like this and art, the cell phones disappear. They begin to talk to each other. They begin to laugh. The energy of the classroom changes completely. Depuis que j'ai commencé le collège, ma vie était plus en plus dépressive. And it goes on, further to talk about the value of the project. So I'm sorry I have to rush through these a little bit in light of time, but hopefully you're getting a little bit of an idea of the ambiance that is created when the students produce things, and a lot of pride in creating artwork. This I will just play for you. Unfortunately, because of sound issues, you won't hear that the background of this environment is music. So here's an example of where I did an atelier in a classroom in a humanities course, and showed them, explained a bit of what it is, and then they started playing. And so what you don't hear is really the music and the energy, because you can hear just this beautiful energy of the students just talking in a very calm way with each other, and looking as they look for their poem. So I'll just show you the visual of this. And you'll notice that I have the teacher is doing it at the same time, which again brings the educator a moment of calm and well-being.
Yeah, me too. Like a lot. There's no reason. There's no reason.
So I'd like to, now share with you some more concrete points. Sometimes when we, talking about this, there still might be some ambiguity. Well, what is this really doing? So I began by emphasizing the point about the scaffolding. And this is the first thing that I hope you got a sense of when you were doing the project, the little, attempt in Miro. But what's happening is that you're scaffolding the reading process. So again, the act is you're scanning something, you're rereading it, you're selecting, you're illustrating, you're discussing, you're presenting with this one text. It activates their metacognition, so they're really thinking profondément. They're thinking they're thinking deeply about this one piece of written material that you're trying to bring to a course for them to understand. It improves engagement with the course content in a sense that they're doing something that's fun and playful. It illustrates which parts of the text the student is connecting to or struggling with. And it's something that I like to give as an icebreaker. So you can come in on, the first day of class and ask them to do this activity. And when you collect the materials, if you so choose, then you'll get a little bit of a taste of where they're struggling, their hesitations with the content, especially if you say, okay, so how does your poem that you came up with, how does it connect to the text that you initially read? Do you see a connection? So it gives you a window into their thinking process. By the act of doing this, you'll find it'll improve retention. And students, they like competitions. They like something that's a bit of a game. And by, this activity turns them into a bit of a detective. You're asking them to find something within the text. It's, of course, a break from technology, so they forget about their phones. That's a guarantee. It reinforces the academic integrity that we're hoping for. Well-being, slow pedagogy, as I've mentioned before, it's exercising that right brain that we're not paying enough attention to most often. We need to activate that creative brain for a million different reasons that have been written about and talked about for years. Turns the course content into something personal. And I'll come back to that in a second, but that is so incredibly important for our students to really create something with meaning to them, of course, as many of us already know. And transversal competencies. This is a huge one. We have to introduce more of those soft skills to our classroom. And, an activity like this, like many creative activities, is really improving and, speaking to an aid in emotional intelligence and communication and creativity, all of these elements of transversals that we, again, really need to think deeply about in our course content. So to paint a picture of how to go about it. So what do? We do our best, ideally, to supply markers and art supplies if possible. But, there are teachers that simply at the beginning of the term put in their course outline, bring not just pens and pencils and erasers, bring some coloring markers. And that's okay, that there'll be activities to do with color markers. You want to create a calm atmosphere, and whether you use music is often a great thing to use, an instrumental soft sound that is not overly invasive, but just something to calm the pace can be very, very lovely to enhance the atmosphere. This should never be a rush. So, try to incorporate it into your curriculum in a way that you'll have time to do this, because pressure really is the antithesis to any creative activity. It shouldn't be about pressure. It should be about just the process of calm and learning in that context. Start with a short text. I always, introduce students, I always show them what a poem looks like. And of course, there are many different types of poems, but, I show them the flow of a poem typically, and give them a short text to begin, one page that introduces them to something that you might want them to read further. And always remember to, again, it's always process over product. As soon as they feel that there's a test involved, it's going to change the whole atmosphere. And you're going to get your course objectives are going to be met through this formative process. You sort of just have to let that be part of the process of the activity. And yeah, when they see you create a poem too, when they see that you're in the process of coloring and having fun, then it creates a certain, just a nice energy, overall. So some suggestions, again, as I mentioned, use it as an icebreaker. That could be a lot of fun. Have an exhibit, as I pointed out, and it's nice to if you can show students where things can be published. Maybe there's a school newspaper, or maybe there's you want to set up an Instagram or I don't know, so whatever you want to do, that sort of gives students an opportunity to say, oh, my work has merit and it can go elsewhere, it can be presented elsewhere, is a wonderful confidence booster. It's very important to me to think, about decolonizing pedagogy. And creative activities really have that power. Is how do we change the way that we are communicating with our students and that they are existing in this very institutionalized space? Blackout poetry, like many, again, creative activities, really do have that. And I'm always learning about this. I'm not, you know, I don't assume that I know everything about how to decolonize my pedagogical, you know, work, but I'm learning, and it really does mean a lot to me. And three things that I can point out that an activity like this does provide that is in line with you know, indigenizing curriculum is storytelling. When you give students an opportunity, excuse me, to tell a story and to tell something and to give them a place to do something that's personal, that they can share, it's you know, it becomes a very meaningful opportunity for them. When it comes to visibility, art education can allow students who are in the minority feel seen. It can help them foster engagement and connection to the curriculum and to each other. And of course, empathy, because let's face it, we need a lot more empathy in the world. We need to teach empathy in whatever ways that we can. And art as a whole has that. You know, these kinds of activities help students to develop empathy for themselves, for each other, from different cultural backgrounds. Um, and again, you know, fostering a more ethical and equitable learning environment. So something to think about that I hope makes sense. So merci, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I would love if any of you are interested in exploring this further. Like I said, this is something that I truly believe is accessible to any discipline. It's creating art in a classroom is something that you can do within 5 minutes. You can do it in an hour. There are many different angles to take, but I do hope that you see this as something that might foster some new ideas. And should you want to reach out and talk further about it, my ear is always open. So I would love to talk to you about it. Dans les deux langues, je suis ouverte. Si vous voulez jaser un petit peu en français aussi, ça me fera plaisir. These are some of the sources that I've used. And voila, I'm going to stop sharing right now. Mind spinning with ideas. That's great to hear. It does. Once you open the door to creative possibility, I mean, truly, it's endless. I mean, I had somebody in math who came up to me during an atelier, I think it was at QPC, and said, "Oh my God, I have ideas, you know, for my math course." And I mean, you can do it in any context. And yeah, I think this will open the floodgates. I'd like to just give a shout out to Max. Max, thank you so much as always. Our pedagogical team at Vanier College.
Always a pleasure.
It's our pedagogical team, yeah, is just so solid. I mean, Max since the beginning saw the value in this project and has always been trying to find, you know, hell, why don't you apply here? Why don't you go and, you know, present over there? And so I really value that, and I think that we need to really give a shout out as much as possible to our pedagogical staff behind the scenes who are just really out there for us and have been such a helpful guide for me as well. So thank you, Max. If you have any questions, please, we have, I guess, a few minutes, and I'd be more than happy to answer or chat.
Yes, and you can raise your hand if you want to speak. Wait. By the way, I would like to thank you very much for this webinar, which was very different, as I wrote, from other webinars that are usually offered. It was a breath of fresh air and very inspiring. Thank you very
merci,
much.
Nicole. Merci, Nicole, c'est gentil. And very relaxing too. That's good to hear. Merci. Je suis bien contente. That's great.
I don't know if there are questions.
I mean, questions or comments. If you're in a discipline and you're not sure how to,
you can write in the Q&R button.
Of course.
Use the Q&R button or raise your hand if you want.
Okay. Merci Marthe.
Alors, des remerciements, vous en avez.
Oui,
merci
bien gentil,
beaucoup.
merci.
Merci. Et eh bien, je pense que tout est complet. Je remercie les participants qui ont été très attentifs aussi et merci pour votre belle présentation à tous les deux.
Merci Nicole, merci.
Thank you very much and see you, I hope.
Absolutely.
bientôt.
Merci tout le monde.
Merci.
Merci. Bye bye.
Au revoir.